Welcome, everyone. It is 5:15 on Monday, February 10th, 2020, and the Carroll City Council meeting is now in session. Will everyone please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? Thank you. Our first item this evening is the consent agenda, which is approval of the minutes of the January 28th meeting, approval of bills and claims. We have no licenses and permits this evening. We have three appointments to committees and commission boards. Brenda Ho to the Library Board of Trustees, Mary Bruner to Parks and Recreation and Cultural Advisory Board, and Jonathan Campbell for Board of Adjustment. If there's no discussion, I'll need a motion to approve the consent agenda, please. Second. There's a motion and a second. If there's no other discussion, we'll go ahead and vote, please.
Bates? Yes. Bailey? Yes. Siemens? Yes. Stewart?
Yes.
Tots?
Yes.
Fleischner?
Yes. Thank you. The next item is oral requests and communications from the audience on things that are not on the agenda.
I got a statement.
All right, give us your name, please. Leo, okay. In regards to the question, we'll get to that. That's on the agenda. So I'll get back to you. Yeah, thank you. The next item is a proclamation for the Rotary International. The states, whereas Rotary International, founded on February 23rd, 1905 in Chicago, Illinois, USA, is the world's first and one of the largest non-profit service organizations. The local Rotary Club was founded on February 23rd, 1921, and whereas the Rotary motto, service above self, inspires members to provide humanitarian service, encourage high ethical standards, and promote goodwill and peace in the world, and whereas Rotary funds club projects and sponsors volunteers with community expertise to provide medical supplies, health care, clean water, food production, job training, and education to millions in need, particularly in developing countries. And now, therefore, I, Eric P. Jensen, Mayor of the City of Carroll, on behalf of the City Council, do by here proclaim February 23rd, 2020 as Rotary Day in Carroll, Iowa. Is there anybody from the Rotary?
Just say thank you.
Thanks, Adam. Appreciate it. All right. Our first item this evening on ordinances is the Carroll City Ordinance, Chapter 69.088 Amendment, the 30-minute temporary parking request, and the third reading and roll, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Just an update, reminder, this is for the furthest north parking stall in the 100 block of South Clark Street. So, straight in front of the school, furthest north stall there. Since the meeting on January 28th, I have not had any feedback for or against this. So, as my recommendation would be, you would go ahead and approve the ordinance tonight.
We've had the first reading. Is there any other discussion with regard to this ordinance? Otherwise, I'll need a motion for the change of the amendment to 69.08 subsection 8 of the City of Carroll Ordinance and waive the second and third readings.
Actually, it's just the third reading.
Right. Oh, just the third reading. Okay. So moved. Second. There's a motion and a second. If there's no other discussion, we'll go and vote, please.
Stewart?
Yes.
Bailey?
Yes.
Tots?
Yes.
Bates? Yes. Fleischner?
Yes.
Siemens? Yes. Motion carried.
And then I need a motion to adopt.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. If there's no other discussion, we'll go and vote, please.
Siemens? Yes. Tots?
Yes.
Bailey?
Yes.
Bates? Yes. Stewart?
Yes.
Fleischner?
Yes.
Ordinance is adopted.
Thank you. The next item on the ordinances is rental housing code. And Mike, please. I'll get to you, Leo. Just a second, Mike will introduce it, and then I'll holler at you. Sorry, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. As the Council is aware, the Council has been considering and working towards the creation of a rental housing inspection program for over a year now, and also adopting a rental housing code. To that end, the City Council has held a workshop May 28, 2019, held an open house for rental housing owners on June 26, of 2019, and the Council's reviewed various options on November 11th, 2019, and again November 25th, 2019. Tonight, staff has presented a ordinance and final draft for your consideration on a first reading this evening. I would note that there was a typographical error brought to staff's attention. If you look at page 24, paragraph 26, line 4, the line does say state certified lead paint. It says pain-free. It should be paint-free. So with any consideration tonight, I would ask that that be amended to paint. While not part of tonight's approval, also included in the packet was a summary of the proposed ordinance publication, a proposed fee schedule, and the rental housing property maintenance guide checklist. And that's really just for informational at this point. The proposed rental housing code is to establish minimum standards for rental housing within the city of Carroll, and is that's intended for human occupancy. It is required that properties hold an annual rental housing permit, and that properties would then be subject to an inspection every 3 years in order to safeguard the health, safety, and welfare of the occupants of the dwelling and the general public itself. Beyond the health and safety of the occupants, there's also other reasons the city has been considering adopting a rental housing code. Some of those reasons include, first, the safety of emergency workers that would be called to that property. Property maintenance is an important item, in part because when there's an issue and emergency response is necessary, we're potentially putting our officers and volunteer firefighters in danger if they're going into an unsafe situation. Second reason would be neighboring properties. Neighboring properties owners, when you have a well-maintained rental housing stock, really doesn't impact the neighbors. But in some cases, rental properties that are not maintained do have an adverse impact on neighboring properties. And part of the aim of this program is to provide an avenue to prevent rental properties from impacting their neighbors. And third is to protect the long-term affordability of our housing stock. Our housing stock, especially the older stock, is also housing stock that is typically used for rental housing, and is some of our most affordable housing that we have in Carroll. When they're not well maintained, we tend to lose that housing stock, and additionally, the replacements of those units tend to be more expensive and not affordable. So by not maintaining, that does affect affordability, because as you take those units out of the market, that puts additional pressures on affordability. So there's a number of reasons why the city's been considering this. One comment the city's received feedback from, there's been a number of tenants that have contacted the city and I know some council members concerned with proposed fees, and that fees would cause the price of the rental housing units to go up. And if you go to the next slide, I think one thing just to make clear, what the city is proposing would be a $35 annual permit fee for a single-family home with $10 additionally a year for each additional unit in a unit. That breaks down to $2.92 a month for a single-family home, $1.88 a month for a duplex unit per month, and $1.38 a month per unit in a fourplex. So some of the comments that tenants bring hundreds of dollars a month increase in their rental prices, in reality, that's not what this program would cause. The fear that some of these property owners have been pushing that that this is going to have a dramatic increase. Again, we think it's important to maintain, the safety, and these standards that are being presented and considered by the council really are kind of minimal, basic life safety issues. This isn't the shag carpet cops. We're not going to make sure that your house is painted pink or you have, nice carpeting. This is making sure that there's not holes in the floor, the foundations aren't falling in, that, the house is painted, that not 50% of the paint has fallen off. This is really minimal standards to have good, safe housing. With that, I know the council spent a lot of time discussing this. I'd be happy to answer any questions at this point, and would recommend that the council consider the first reading of the proposed ordinance this evening. Thank you.
Mike, one thing I'd like to add to that is one of the questions I get several times as council members is we've got 2 apartment complexes in town that seem to draw a lot of attention from the police department and just issues, and I think we all know where they are. This is one of those ways that we're addressing that, because that's one of the questions. What are you doing about it? And this is one of the ways I feel that we're addressing those issues.
Since there's a lot of people here from the public, I was going to allot 20 minutes. I know we've had discussions over the past several months with regards to this. So if there's someone that wants to come up and speak, there's a total of 20 minutes. You got roughly about 3 to 5 minutes. I know, Leo, you want to come up. I'll come back up again, please, and I'll let you finish. Thank you. Thank you for waiting. Yep. Thank you very much, Leo. I got about 9 more minutes if anybody else wants to come forward. Come on up, sir. Don, okay. Thank you.
My
Thanks, Dave.
that requirement is for, primarily sleeping rooms. I think it talks about, being below grade, lower than 4 foot in the window well. You have to have access to get out of there and be qualified.
Yeah. Got 4 more minutes. If anybody else going once, going twice.
Wait a minute.
Okay. I thought I could gorge you up. Give us your name.
Renter's application.
Is that
That's good.
information? Yeah. Typically going through tell homeowners or landlords.
Not normally, no.
Can I say one more thing?
Come on, sorry, yeah. Sorry.
So the day that I went there and came back,
50 seconds. Going once. Going twice. Anybody else?
I can't see.
All right. Is there any discussion amongst council? Do you have anything else to add? Or? I think we got probably some changes or clarifications. But.
Yeah. I don't know what to say.
Well, is there a way to get some of these changed that they brought up sounded like some legitimate things that maybe should be changed in here? And Greg, specifically the rental dwelling that question here on 2 exits. Like, where did you get that? I assume you got it from some sort of a
codes I use, and I can see where that's maybe a little confusing, but it talks about a second egress, particularly from.
Okay, but this entire thing was developed with a template of programs that have been successful elsewhere, I assume.
Yeah,
correct?
I talked to Region 12 Council of Governments, got input from them.
Mhm.
They suggested some other cities that had codes, and I kind of put together what I felt was good, and then Mike reviewed it, and we did have input from a few of the landlords after the initial draft was written, and if something didn't get changed.
Honestly, this would be the 3rd council meeting we've had about it, and the first 2, if I recall, there was no objections from anyone on this.
Yeah.
The semantics in here until tonight on the specifics in this. And if there are some concerns, I'd like to have those fixed, just like,
Sure.
Yeah,
we'd be glad to do
and
that. And
starting a first reading doesn't stop us from changing that, approving a first reading, but, I'm all for getting those things adjusted. If there's other things someone wants to mention, it's not too late. Sounds like, Doug, you had a legitimate question, and
one of the reasons we didn't contest it last time, because this was not out, and we had a 3-hour meeting with those 3 guys. They said, we're gonna change it all to what we're gonna contest. You guys talked about not charging us fees. I mean, we're not gonna contest, because this came out just last week, about the same as it was originally when it came out the first time. There's not much change. There's only 2 small changes on it. And it actually was an add-on instead of 2 little things were changing. There's an add-on. That was the only change over 3 hours of discussion. So it doesn't seem like anybody wants to work with the landlords. They want to do it their way and don't care what the landlord says, no matter what we say.
No, Leo, I'm going to contest you on that. There were a couple changes that were made, you call them small. The additions that you say were made, I checked into that. They were not in fact additions, they were clarifications that the process didn't have.
The lead paint was added on, that was never in originally. And the 2 changes was moving the shut-off valve from a furnace from 3 foot within the room. That was, and changing the ladder from 6 foot to 8 foot. The rest was just small little things that was not understandable, because it was not understandable.
So the lead paint was a good example. What was the other one we talked about, Mike?
The example that Leo brought up on the paved driveway, that's actually a city code requirement today. It's not actually a requirement of within the rental housing, so that shows up in the checklist. And I know one of the things the landlords requested was kind of a list of things that we would look at. We looked at some checklists that other communities provided, and we kind of pulled out the items out of our city code. And so what you'll see is that refers to, I think it's chapter 170, if I recall right off the top of my head.
170.
Yep. And so that's actually an existing code requirement. That's not anything we've.
Okay. So then what about all the homeowners that don't have it done? We're gonna go after all of them? So I start walking around the street, driving around the street saying, gravel, and then we got all these homeowners gonna spend $10,000 putting gravel in their yard. These people that are living on Social Security, they gotta all do it. If I gotta do it, by golly, everybody else is gonna do it. The homeowner's gonna do it. If that's a code, we better live with it.
Leo, I think you're right. You've made a lot of good points, and I've had a lot of complaints about rental houses specifically, but homeowners letting their homes go and become eyesores also. And I contact city staff and they get on it as soon as possible. But all the things you're talking about, that's really a strong argument for why we need somebody hired to to address, like the driveways, a lot of stuff we've let go. Personally believe, I'm not speaking for anyone else, I believe a lot of things we've let go that impacts quality of life and health and safety issues, even getting into sidewalks that are cracked and degrading, the issue that you brought up with the ground law, things that have probably been, going on a long time. We haven't had a person that can get right on these things and do an extensive, comprehensive, address these things and treat everybody the same. So I am not about growing government at all, but the very thing you mentioned, to be fair to you, the people with rental properties, we need somebody, so we're also working with people who own their own homes and also meet our code. So
There's no referendum against them. It's only against the landlord. That's
I would say I know I have tried, and the city staff has worked with me. It's just been time constraints, etc. And that's been my experience. But you're right about that.
Well, you brought up a very good point too. We are not allowed by the state to reach into those private homes, and you said it well. We are allowed to govern when it comes to rental
But
properties.
if you get a complaint, you gotta check their code. You can check their code.
Yeah, we do.
And I got a complaint from, and Bob Merritt, and back then we were building 20 houses a year. I was building 3 or 4. Our building inspector must really be busy watching them 3 or 4 houses, where Bob took care of 20 houses and still had time to take care of my little problem. And what's going on here? We got a building inspector ready. Let's use him.
We do use them, and we use them pretty well. Yeah, there's a lot of commercial building going on also that
There's no stuff going on.
I agree with you. There has always been stuff.
We've been a growing city, but it's time to keep up. You got a building inspector used to do 20 houses, now they do 4. We still can't keep up. Something's wrong.
But they also,
That was very useful
inspect,
year last year.
they also, the building inspector also inspects more different things than they did back in the day, or back in that time too. I mean, I try to get a hold of Perry all the time, and he's always busy doing something. It's not, I don't think that that burden should be put on.
A lot of the code requirements have changed, and
Yes.
they're a lot more in depth for construction today than they were back then. I mean, I just look at my parents' house and I look at the house that I bought 30 years ago, and just the difference in the construction, and noticing the things that were different, the expectation of thicknesses of walls, concrete, port basements, and that sort of thing. What my parents have is completely different than what I had. Their house was built in 75. So and talking with some contractors, there's more burdensome on from the state and federal level than especially with electrical and plumbing. A lot of that stuff, a lot of those codes have increased dramatically on how you can wire a house. I probably could have done one years ago, but I'm not going to do it today. There's just too much to know. I worked construction for 4 years with Batings, and just the stuff that I had to learn. I mean, that was back in the 80s. So we're out of public time, but Doug, I know it's a contentious issue. I give people as much time as we can.
I'll just get, because of my position at American Home Shield, I have the opportunity to work with, unfortunately, a lot more situations than I want to with codes and that sort of thing across the country. And one thing that I noted, and I didn't read the entire agreement, and I understand it's Greg's readings. I trust that there's nothing in here that we're trying to do intentionally one way or another, because I have a lot of confidence in Greg Schreck. But one thing is, I noted in the gas piping stuck out, maybe some electrical things. I know what a lot of municipalities across the country will do, rather than say, hey, it has to be like this right now. What they will do is say, it gets grandfathered in, but if it needs repair, then at that point it needs to be updated, rather than incur the immediate expense of whatever it might be in that situation. So, in other words, if I had, let's say for example, if I had galvanized gas piping in the home, and I don't know if it does or not, I didn't go to check.
But code at the time.
Yeah, but that was code at the time. I think this one now says it has to be black piping.
Right.
But what most ordinances will do is say, it can stay what it is until it is in need of repair, then at that point it needs to be brought up to code, because plumbers will call us all the time and say, I can't do this because I need to bring it up to code, which in our case with American Ocean, we don't cover some of those things, so we have to alert the customer that you have to bring this up to code at this point. I think that would be a reasonable solution to that one.
Well, and
That's just an example of some things, and to Jerry's point, I think there's just a couple of clauses that need to be looked at, and I would be glad to be involved with that if that's what you were looking for from our group.
Is that something possible to be put in the language?
Yeah, I would think it would be.
Okay.
And because this, if this code is adopted, I mean, there is still room down the road to change things. If we find that something just doesn't fit,
Well, I think
it can always be amended.
one of the points that we took home the last time was we're not out to get anybody. We're just trying to get the living standards up
Right.
to a good level. And I think we were willing to work with everybody. That's the way I understood it, so.
Well, Leo, I just want to address too, you brought up we didn't build as many homes this year, you're right. And looking at, we had in 19, 7 new homes, in 18, 19 new homes, but we're seeing a trend among single-family homes, additions, alterations, et cetera. The number of permits issued this year was 47 as opposed to 34 last year. We had almost 2 million in those kinds of, so our people are busy also because of what's going on with the additions, alterations, those kinds of permits, as well as the new homes. So a lot is going on in addition to the new homes. In fact, 2019 had almost the same amount in permits for alterations and new homes as we did for new homes in 18.
But my whole thing is, we need to keep this rent down for the people in the working class. 25% of the people are renters. They're the working class of our town. They're the ones that need low-income rental. We need to help them out. We don't want to tax them at $600 a year when we're getting taxed $2 a year. It's not fair. We need to work on that, and it's going to go up, because if we have hassles to go through, we're going to raise our rent.
The one thing that this has in place that we currently don't have is there's some units out there that are in trouble. We all know that. But we have no way of getting in those unless we do something like this just to inspect it. Unless you guys got an idea that we can get into some of those units that are in trouble, how do we do that if we don't have something like this in place to be able to walk in and inspect it?
Make a proposal, certain houses in town have the quality they look at.
Well, then how do you divide that?
Rental or owner, doesn't matter.
If your place is in good shape, well, that could be too. We could do that. This is a 3-year thing. It's not a 1-year thing. There's a lot of ways that we can go after this. But if we have nothing in place and these renters come to us and complain, or
how many?
Well,
what are they complaining about? Are they complaining about
well, you can go all over with that. I mean, there's a house that has a hole in the living room, potential falling into the basement.
That's a complaint that could be said that's code.
Bingo,
Make it so
bingo. But we're going to take 3 years, 4 or 5, whatever, to get all of this done. We're not going to do it immediately. But I just don't know of a tool for the renters where they can say, I got an issue in my house. What can I do? You got to look at their side of this thing too. And then, safety, there's a lot of safety things that if we don't have a tool to get into that house and look at it, you're letting, people are letting those renters live in unsafe homes.
any of my homes?
Well, I get that. I know you would, but there's some that won't.
Right.
So what's our tool? If you have an idea different than that, let us know. But right now, I don't see anything, but, and some of this cost, let's say we inspect something, and there's a cost to that to get it up to code. I guess I'd like to, have the idea of us talking about it, that if there's something that's really expensive, it says you got 30 days to fix it. I don't agree with that. I said, if it's a couple $100, yeah, or whatever, but if let's say it's 4,000, 10,000, let's extend that period to 3 years or some other years that you have time to take your expenses and cover it out 2 to 3 years, so you're not blunt on that 1 year. I would like to discuss that with council, so we can extend, don't put the burden on you so hard. I do think, though, there is a date that you have to be firm with. You can't just say extend it forever. I think we have to have a firm date on, 3 years. I don't know what it would be. We need to discuss that it has to be completed. But
Yeah, I think that's a good idea, but I think maybe that should be, if we start making rules that are too rigid, it doesn't give the inspector and our staff the flexibility to negotiate something like what you're wanting.
yeah,
And one of the things I would say is we've always talked to, we had a situation where we had a dangerous building we declared about a year ago. The city worked and bent over backwards for about 11-month period. And, it was about give us communication, tell us what you're going to do, how you're going to do it. And we just couldn't get them to communicate with us. And, ultimately it got to the point that the city council elected to declare it a dangerous building and, it's going to come down. But my point being, we will work with property owners. If there's a situation where, there's an egregious issue, not here in Carroll, but in another community I worked in, the second floor actually started to collapse down and was resting on the refrigerator. And, we got a call from the tenant, something needs to be done. Well, we declared that an emergency situation, and the tenants left that day. I mean, that you couldn't live. I mean, the house was collapsing in on so. There's going to be some situations. I think it's a life safety emergency. Yeah, that's a $10,000 fix, but you got to get out of it. But there's going to be other issues that we want to work with you, and figure out a plan that the landlord, property owner can agree to, and get it done. I mean, we've never been in my tenure here at the city have been so heavy-handed of working with property owners to address issues. I know these codes look really scary and there's always scary dates in them, but Perry and Greg, I think, have worked really hard to try to accommodate issues when they're found. There may be some like the black rigid pipe with the gas lines. Yeah, I think there's some things that we can talk about and come back with different proposals. There's other things where the minimum openings that are in here. If there's not a code compliant issue where you have someone that's living in the basement and you just have 18-inch by 3-foot opening, well, I can't get a firefighter through that window with an air pad. Well, that's not a situation where we say, well, no, this situation could be grandfathered. So there's going to be some stuff that I would say we're not, from a safety standpoint, we're going to err and say that we can't be safe because we're not just putting the tenant in danger, but we're putting a volunteer firefighter in danger trying to get in and recover someone that maybe is injured in the basement and can't get out. So, there's a lot of balancing acts in these things. What I would say is the staff is always going to err on trying to work with property owners and come with a resolution.
Go ahead. We had talked about that too, and there was not any intention of raising that at all. Yeah. Now in 4 years that might be different, but not 3. I'm kidding. Yeah, if you want. Sorry, Clay.
If I can go through just a few issues that were raised, because I think, Leo had made a couple comments on, the smoke detectors. That was an item that we went back and talked. And actually, what state code says is there's a differentiation between new construction. And I don't know if you remember the year, it was like 1980, 1990.
Yeah.
There's a period where stuff post that year had to have a married bedroom. Stuff before there was a grandfather. And I know after the meeting, Clay and Greg, we talked at length on that one. And I think ultimately, going back to one of my earlier comments, we kind of felt from a safety perspective, we defaulted to safety. I think it could be an item to discuss, but, you know, the circuit breakers, I mean, again, that's really kind of a current code issue. You know, broken board on the fence. Yeah, you know, it's a balancing act too.
Well, it's written in here. If it's written, it's gotta be done.
Yep.
That's what I'm saying. To get it out of there, if you're saying we're just gonna kind of watch it, we're gonna be easy on you, get it out of the form. If it's in the form, it's gospel.
I agree with you, Leo. I'm not disagreeing there. And I think what I'm saying is like the smoke detectors, you know, we defaulted on safety on there. So I mean, I think some of these others are new. We didn't talk about those in the 3-hour meeting we had. But you know, our staff, you raised that as an issue. Again, I'm going to, you know, our staff really is out there. Again, while residential's down, you know, commercial's almost double what it was just a few years ago. And you see that in our building permit values and the work they're doing. And I mean, I think Perry and Craig do a really fine job in that regard. Mr. Canny asked a question about tax abatement. We actually, about a year ago now, created a tax abatement availability in kind of the core area of the city of Carroll. So we do have tax abatement that's available. We don't offer it in kind of what I call greenfield areas, but kind of the core area, just to address exactly what I was saying. How do we regenerate some of these properties? You know, we do have a tax abatement program. More than happy to discuss that. It's actually, some of the information is on our website. I know I do a weekly update. You know, I'd be happy to include some information on there. You know, if you want communication with the city, if you go up to our website and look at agendas and minutes, there's actually a place that you can sign up. You can get copies of our city council agendas. I typically about once a week try to send out a kind of an update of what's happening in the city. You can certainly sign up and get a copy of that because we want to keep people informed. But you know, tax abatement is an item we have up there. I know our fine media has covered that fact. There was one other item. You know, the point was raised with our police department on the 30 reports, and you know, to be honest, our officers really work hard to do a lot of different work in a lot of different areas. You know, they don't necessarily monitor who a property owner is. Sometimes they know it's rental, sometimes they don't. I know they work with landlords all the time proactively to address some issues. You know, one of our problem properties in town that's changed hands. Our police department's been working really hand on hand with the ownership, and it really has changed a lot of what's happened on that property. But there's a lot more that needs to be improved. What I would say is this is be one of those tools of we don't know what all the properties are rental properties. You know, one of the things that we ran into when we held the rental housing owners meeting back in June of last year, we missed some people and we kind of got criticized. Well, why did you miss me? Well, in part is, you know, the only true database we have there is our water utility. If the water bill is not in the landlord's name, the tenant has to provide a deposit. That's really the only tracking mechanism we have on what's property, what properties are rental and what are not. That doesn't cover probably 20% of the rental units we have out in the city of Carroll. So it's not a complete list, so it's really difficult. And again, you know, our officers don't know who is, again, what a rental property and what not. And they shouldn't be expected to be kind of the property tax trackers or the property ownership trackers of our community. I think those are really kind of the highlights of what I heard tonight and just wanted to address.
Well, I think since we do have some changes, all the readings have to be of the same nature or the same document. So we'll take this and make the changes and then bring it back again.
Do we need to table this then, or would that?
What are the changes specifically?
I think some clarification on.
Is there any chance?
sorry.
I'm just
Go ahead.
curious. I mean, there was a lot of stuff talked about tonight. Is there any chance that can we pull together another meeting where it's just us, just reviewing this? I mean, not so that we can just talk about what things we may see. Maybe we've heard from other people, but it's a big reading. It would be nice if
Like
we
a
could just
workshop?
a workshop. I mean, let's really dig into it. I know you guys are doing your very best, and I'm not questioning what you've put together, Greg, but I'm also hearing what these folks are saying too. And ultimately, I mean, Carolyn and I went to, and Mike went to a thing on this kind of thing. And we can't do it complaint based. It doesn't work. I mean, we've been directed to not do that. So we're trying to do this the best way that we can, and ultimately it is safety. We have houses out there that we can't get into, like Laverne says, that we have to have a tool to be able to do that. We have to keep the people safe, and we don't want our housing stock to deplete. So I'd like to spend more time on it personally.
One of the things that's not been talked about tonight is this is a multi-tool thing. It's not just your landlords, it's also the renters. They now have, with this, they also now have a tool that they can contact, you know, if there's a safety issue. You know, we're after safety and health, a big thing. And there was no tool for the renters before this. So you have to look at this as a multiple, you know, issue, not just for the landlords.
I can only speak for myself again, and I agree with you, Laverne. I think the city does need that tool because I think, you know, there's a lot of these that do need to be cleaned up. And I want to personally say thank you for listening to at least me tonight and to us and to reconsidering some of the changes. And I hope you are willing to take input from some of the folks in this room about maybe what some of those things might be. But I understand that ultimately you got to get somewhere with it. So that's my perspective on it.
Well, what you guys are gonna discuss, let's discuss getting rid of that fee, and just getting all these things that we gotta worry about. That'll help a little bit, but let's get rid of that fee, let some taxpayers pay it. I mean, we're paying for some guy to inspect us, to watch us, tell us what to do, then fine us. It just doesn't make sense. I don't wanna hire somebody to tell me what I'm doing wrong. You hire him, that's fine, but I don't wanna
We had this discussion a while back, and immediately the next day and starting after that, when we talked about having the taxpayers pay it, we got hit pretty hard by the taxpayers saying, why should they, as, you know, out of the general fund, why should they be taxed for this issue? So we heard the other side of that.
So, but why should we be taxed? We're gonna be taxed, and we're just gonna pass it on, so I guess, and it's Janet's, in the whole sense, Janet's the one that's gonna get hurt. They're gonna have a leverage for us.
Everybody, and we got hit on that pretty hard.
They're gonna
If
have
you're a
something.
tenant and it's unfair. I take care of my place and put in a lot of work and I'm gonna get penalized for it. That's not fair.
So you're,
Whatever gets fixed, our rent goes up.
All right. We'll get a workshop put together and then we'll go through this again, okay?
One comment if I can before we go. You know, certainly we, you know, and I've talked to a couple landlords in the last week or so. I mean, if there are items in here that you don't like, and we've said this a few times, if there's items that you don't like, you know, what I would say is contact staff, email us with suggestions. You know, we want to hear those. Now, it doesn't always mean that you make a suggestion and, you know, staff will make a proposal back to say this should be changed to exactly what you desire. But certainly we want to hear those. We'll communicate it. I mean, if you email it to us, we'll certainly make sure the council gets that information. You know, what I would say is give us specific changes, because I know we've asked for it a few times, and we really haven't gotten, these are the 3 things or 10 things or 100 things we want proposed to be changed in here. So, you know, please, you know, detail is important in this.
Yeah, I agree with you, Mike. I think we've had some good feedback and some good listings on that. You know, we keep coming out with fire extinguishers and smoke detectors, and heats. And those are some of the primary things that we talked about in that meeting that was 3 hours ago. And, you know, Mike's right. Pick this around 10 ways from Sunday. I can't find a way in my heart to say I don't think there should be a smoke detector put in those bedrooms. Maybe I'm wrong, maybe the state's right and the federal government's right, but that's my personal belief. I don't want to lie to you either. I don't see a way for the fees to go away. I don't know how we can make it any more minimal than what it is right now at the 35 and then the 10 for the additional locations.
I have a question about that. we're also taxpayers and stuff, so we're part of that general taxation and stuff as tenants. So why can't that be used as being able to pay for those fees instead of us, it coming out of our pockets individually? Like you said, there's what, a quarter of renters that are here in this town. So that's not a small amount, that's big for the city of Carroll. And we pay for things that they want done. Like there's people that don't have kids, but yet they're taxpayers, and that goes for playgrounds, that goes for schools, that goes for everything, but they don't have kids. So I don't understand why it's that the fees can't be taken out of the general tax. It just doesn't make any sense to me.
You know, it might not make any sense, but I thought about this a lot, and I'm going to tell you something. It's the way the world works. I have a business. You guys have a business. My business has to pay a fee to the state of Iowa, and that fee goes to an inspection and appeals board who turns around and inspects me. It's exactly the same thing. You know, every business has that. And in this, it's hard to look at owning, renting property as a business, but that's what it is.
Well, yeah.
And so the responsibility becomes to the business owner.
Tenants. So you're only thinking about the landlords and their fees and stuff, but the tenants are the ones that are going to pay for it because it's just the domino theory.
I regret that. I really do. And the same thing happens in every business. A building contractor has to get a permit. It's passed on, you know, as an expense. I wish it wasn't, but that's not the way the world works. These things have to be funded. It's all about safety. That's the main issue.
I agree with that, but I think there could be a different way to go about it, and I don't think that.
Ironically, Jerry said building, the builders in town. I've had some contractors come and talk to me on this, and they said, if you waive the fee for this, then they want all their building permits waived. So we have to listen to that too. You know, you see where we're stuck?
But how is that fair whenever you got a garage off from an alley and then you guys were asking to put cement in there and then the tenant's gotta pay for that? How's that fair? That's not.
That's yours.
And what's gonna happen is the rent's gonna go up and people are gonna start moving out of Carroll.
Yeah, that may be a really great example for us to consider, grandfather clauses and the like, and I would look for that to come up in discussion in our workshop.
I saw your hand go up. You wanted to say anything else, or?
Well, you people have been talking about, you want specifics and so on. I got a page of them and I've gone through line by line and so on, but you know, whatever.
You can.
And I've got procedural things. I'm not gonna argue with you about the $35. And I would guess that most of us in here aren't going to argue with the $35. The point is the $35, you just scratch the surface. Because you're gonna, just like the driveway, and Leo's right. You know, it's gonna cost him somewhere between $5 and $10 grand.
I think that's to Clay's point. I think that's what he was saying, is that maybe some of that stuff gets grandfathered in, or then we, you know, start going after the actual land, the actual owners of homes, and start enforcing that code too.
But it goes further than that. If you'll notice, the way this thing is written, if an inspector comes in and says, you don't have that concrete in there, how long do you have to get that in there? 30 days.
Right, and that's, we had just gone over that.
When are you gonna change all this?
Probably about 30 minutes ago, so I think that's one of those things that.
We were discussing this 3 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Why don't we ever gonna see any change?
Leo, what was you talking about, the shining floors? What's that?
That was original, that was not in there anymore, but it's in there that the tenants gotta keep their rooms clean and all that, and we're wondering who's gonna inspect them, you know, that's part of it. Tenants gotta keep their house clean, and in there it said one place, if it's not, then you can evict them. And I'd like to see the city, I got some tenants I'd like to evict once in a while, I'd like to see you get them out in 10, 30 days, it takes 3 months to get mine out, but you think, we're gonna evict them, I'd like to see that happen. I mean, that's a good thing for us. I'd like to see that.
So my question is, how many complaints have you guys had? I mean, what? Does this have something to do with the person dying over the mold in one of the houses? No?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay, so how many complaints have we had on this?
I mean, the city hasn't tracked complaints. We have not tracked complaints. I mean, we've explained that before.
So a few bad ones, everybody else has gotta pay for it. That's what it boils down to.
Yep.
Not everybody, not the
Okay.
Well, no, not the homeowners,
So
that's
we'll
right.
get that, workshop set up then. Okay.
Is that gonna be open to the public?
Yeah.
Yes, all of our meetings.
Everything's open to the public, so we'll get it. I can't guarantee that it's gonna be at the next meeting, but maybe the one after that. Depends on how much what we have scheduled between now and then. We'll get it going. But we'll make sure the public's notified, absolutely.
And certainly, again, if you have, I mean, Dave, your comments, or if you have thoughts, I mean, certainly getting those, we can be proactive and go through some of those. Like I said, any comments you submit to us, we'll certainly get them to council. We're not trying to be kind of filter any of it from that perspective, but some of those we may look at staff and say, yeah, well, that's a different perspective. You know, we can be proactive. That saves everyone a lot of time.
All right. Need a motion for the workshop. So we'll need a motion to table and get a workshop. I'll second. There's a motion and a second. If there's no other discussion, go ahead and vote, please. Yes.
Carroll, my dad's name? Good.
The next item on the agenda is resolutions. Our first resolution this evening is the fire pumper truck and street improvements. The $1,505,000 general obligation capital loan note series 2028. And I believe we need to open a public hearing.
No, we don't need to
Just
open.
gonna discuss it.
Yes, we'll
Okay.
just discuss it. We've already held our public hearings last year when we prepared our budget. We did a pre-levy resolution, and at that time, we held our public hearings. This is the next step in our process to issue the debt for the projects that were mentioned for the pumper truck and for the street improvements project, 2019 project. The next step is for council to approve the methods to receive the bids, which the bids are scheduled to be received on February 24th, which is the date of our next council meeting. We'll receive them that morning at 10 a.m. and then the information will be presented that night of who the low bidder is. But the methods that are being recommended to be used are to receive sealed bids here at City Hall, fax the information to PFM, our financial advisors, or use what's called the parity competitive bidding system, which is an electronic system to get some bidders maybe further away, so to speak, some in the market to bid on the project. And also with this resolution is for council to approve what's called the preliminary official statement. It was attached to this item. It's a pretty thick item to look at. But I just wanted to make note that over the years, the SEC has really wanted to make councils aware that this is their document that they're putting out to potential bidders, that this is information of the city as we say, this is how the city is sitting with our financials and such. And for the council that they would deem this nearly final prior to that the bidders have this information prior to submitting a bid. City staff has reviewed this preliminary official statement, and we believe that the facts and representations are true and correct to the best of our knowledge. Legal counsel has reviewed some of it for the legal side of things, but they cannot obviously speak to the city financial part of it. PFM did help in the preparing it. However, we, as the city, have the final, this is our document. So with that, does council have any questions about this process or this step, what we're doing? And then the next step will be at the next council meeting of actually getting the actual interest rate bids themselves. We will contact all the local banks so they're aware that the city is doing this at this time. I think they know we're issuing the debt because I've talked to them numerous times over the last few months, but now we're actually at that step to actually take the bids themselves.
Any questions for Lauren? If not, I need a motion to approve the resolution for the electronic bidding procedures and distribution of the preliminary official statements.
So moved. Second.
There's a motion and a second. Any other discussion? If not, we'll go ahead and vote, please.
Seaman?
Yes.
Dirks?
Yes.
Haley?
Yes.
Cox?
Yes.
Fleshner?
Yes.
Base?
Yes.
Motion is approved.
Thank you. The next item under resolutions is bond council engagement agreement. And Laura, when you're ready?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So before you tonight is an engagement agreement from Allers and Cooney as our bond counsel. We've worked with them for many years when we have issued debt, bond notes, or other obligations. And it has come to our attention that they have requested that we have a written engagement agreement in place with them that specifically outlines what services they will and will not provide when we are in the midst of a debt issuance. This engagement is not specific to one particular debt issuance, just like the one that we're doing now. It's not just specific for that, but will remain in effect until necessary to change it. This engagement agreement is being requested to be in place by Allers Insurance Carrier.
So this will be all-encompassing for any future
Yes.
ones, okay.
Unless it's deemed that it needs to be changed, and then it would be come back to council at that time.
I guess that was my, so we don't have to do this every time.
No, we should not.
Going
Yeah,
forward.
I specifically asked that of Kristen, and she said, no, it's in effect until it needs to be changed.
Laura, was there any notable changes from the way we've done business in the past to this being
No.
written out?
No.
How long have they been doing this?
Longer than I've been at the city, and I've been here almost
At some point, I was told over 40 years.
40 years. Any other questions for Lauren? If not, I need a motion to accept the bond council engagement agreement with Allers and Cooney PC for the issuance of bonds, notes, and other obligations.
So moved. Second.
There's a motion and a second. Any other discussion? No, we'll vote, please.
Base?
Yes.
Fleshner?
Yes.
Haley?
Yes.
Dirks?
Yes.
Seaman?
Yes.
Cox?
Yes.
Motion is approved.
Thank you. See, our next item is under reports, and we have a police vehicle purchase. And Brad, please.
Thank you, Mayor. On the 17th of January, one of our police vehicles was involved with a motor vehicle accident at Highway 30 at Main Street. It was a at-fault accident, the other party involved, and we've been working through their insurance carrier, EMC, and they have totaled our vehicle in the process. No injuries occurred during the accident, but we are down a vehicle because of it. The insurance company has agreed to pay for the loss of the vehicle in the amount of $17,131. They've also agreed to pay for the removal and installation of the equipment, and as of this writing, they had not agreed to make the purchase of our equipment that wouldn't transfer, but as of Friday, they have made that agreement. So they are going to pay for all the equipment that doesn't transfer from one vehicle to the next one. So while working through this process, we reached out to our two local vendors who historically provide bids to us. We did bypass the bid system because it's more of an emergency situation to get a vehicle purchased, and to get quotes from Wittrock Motors and Champion Ford, and those are listed on the sheet there. I spoke with our equipment installer. They have never installed in a Dodge vehicle in the past. You know, we've talked about this in the past too. There's always some issues with Dodge having a center console shifting where all of our equipment goes in the vehicle. So they have asked us if we would buy another Ford Interceptor utility like we have now. So those are the prices that we have. We see the low bid, of course, was the Dodge, $31,493. The next would be the Ford 3.3 liter V6 at $34,848. Our last purchase this last year was the hybrid vehicle. We've only had about 1,000 miles up on the road, so I don't have a good set of numbers how it's performing. I mean, I got 1,000 miles worth of numbers, which isn't a whole lot. So my recommendation is that we do stick with the Ford also if possible. So
The one that we had the accident with, that one was a V6 too, wasn't it?
it is, yes. Yep. And the hybrid's a D6 also, just it's different numbers. Yep. Yep. The insurance company's been pretty good to work with. It's gotten a little bit slow, but hopefully we're at the point now. If we do make a purchase, it'll be about 12 to 14 weeks on delivery, and that was both Dodge or Ford, and then about 2 to 4 weeks for install of our equipment after the fact. So we're probably looking at June, and about that time we'll be ordering 2 more cars for next budget year. So this has affected our vehicle rotation also, so we'll make changes as we get down the road. We kind of monitor where the vehicles are at for mileage.
That would explain why I haven't seen Roy for a long time.
He's out, but he's not in that vehicle any longer.
See him every morning when I go to work.
So I guess we have no funding for this. We aren't requesting a budget amendment at this time. We're going to monitor and see how we fall towards the end of the budget cycle to see where we're at. We'll have some revenue that we did not expect, 26,000 and some change, 26,506.70, which will come in from EMC for all of the items that I listed above. And we'll have that revenue adjustment, and then of course we'll have an expense. I think the difference is about between 17 and between 18,000 and 21,000 would be our difference for just the vehicle. So my recommendation is just some discussion, see where you guys are at, and I would suggest we do purchase a Ford if we could.
Well, you never want to see an accident. One of the benefits is obviously normally in a normal course we'd be responsible for taking out the equipment, installing it, buying all that new equipment. So this in the end probably actually is net beneficial to the city.
Bad thing is there's no used police vehicle market, so we can't go out and shop for a used car. It's just non-existent. We're starting all over.
What's in front of us is for the vehicle alone, not the upfit for your equipment, correct?
That is correct. I do have quotes for that. EMC is going to cover that, and it's covered by a company called Keltec. They have the state bid on all police equipment, so there's really no market. It's just them, and that price is $62.95.70 just for the equipment that doesn't transfer. Some does. The problem is that the 17 body style and the 20 body styles are so much different that cages, center consoles, some of the lighting doesn't transfer over, so there's some expense for that, and those are pretty hefty expenses that we would have had to cover anyway down the road. Probably car's probably 2 or 3 more years down the cycle before it got changed out.
What do they estimate the Dodge to be upfit?
For the equipment cost, would be the same, still about the $62.95. Upfit cost, Reesburg's gave me a quote. And I got it tracked in my large stack of papers here. I believe their quote was about $2,600 to transfer, and that was all an estimate. And the insurance company, $2,730 for equipment transfer. And the insurance company did indicate that if their cost was above that, they would meet that difference at that point. They just want to close out what they have now, since we're not looking to get that bill probably till June-ish.
Is there any law enforcement that uses them? Dodge Durangas?
There's a few out there. The sheriff has one now. They bought, and when we got quotes, we didn't get what they got because they said that they do not like it. And we talked with Witch Rock, and they indicated that if you purchase the Hemi model, something to do with the V6 model shuts off half of the motor, and during that process has some electrical problems that ends up shutting off radios, radar machines, and other items in there too, which we don't want those to shut off when that happens. So they've been working through that. There's no good fix yet, and Dodge hasn't come out with anything, is what we've been told by Witch Rock. So they said the V8 Hemi model does not have that problem that the 6-cylinder does.
So that problem doesn't exist with the unit that's bid on here?
Correct. Yeah, we asked him not to bid that one since the sheriff had indicated that he has had problems with it. And we also heard that from Caltech with, they build for pretty much every agency across the state, and they gave that warning also, be careful if you order that model.
So the insurance company is going to cover the installation and the additional accessories no matter what we buy?
That's correct, but I think there's still issues with the Dodge itself, with, again, that center console and the shifter being there. It conflicts with where the equipment is. It's just really awkward for our officers to interact with that. Because again, you have your computer there, you have your radio, you have your lights and sirens. It's just, it really is disruptive to them.
It is a little disruptive. I did look at the sheriff's department vehicle, and there's some workarounds with it. They've had to kind of maneuver the equipment in there different than what we are used to now.
I can give you personal experience from a Dodge Interceptor, the vehicle car the state patrol uses, and it was very, very uncomfortable sitting in that car.
Back seat?
In the front seat. In the front seat. That I can tell you. The equipment in there, they just don't have any room.
They're all tight. We do the best we can to make the stuff work, but they're all. I mean, essentially, once you add a computer in the middle, printers, scanners, all that stuff is maintained mostly in the center console, but it does kind of spill into the passenger seat too.
And one difference too with the sheriff versus we pool our cars. We're not in the same car every day, and so you are putting an officer in a situation where you're switching from car to car and just different layouts can also be problematic. And I think in a high stress environment, you want to avoid that situation.
We talked about this the last time.
Yeah, and for
If
that reason,
there's an emergency and you got to jump in and go. You got to have this place, all your instruments
You know,
familiar.
and everything's set up the same. They all have the equipment in the center console is listed the same from top to bottom. Printers are all in the same location, rifles, shotguns, and the releases for all are all in the same spot too. Just because of that exact situation, if you're jumping in a high stress situation into a new vehicle, you may not know where it's at. So I got into a car the other day to mess with something and turn on the hazard lights on. Never touched those. I couldn't figure out how to turn them off. I didn't know where the button was at. So if you're not used to it, you don't know where it's at.
I mean, you're looking at a V6, V8 fuel difference too. Over time, using a V8, we're gonna probably burn more gas.
I just hate to see us move up from the lowest bid.
Yeah, it's quite.
You've outlined some good reasons to it.
Mm-hmm. And the fuel cost. I mean, the cars now get roughly about 12.2 miles per gallon. The hybrid only got 1,000 miles, and we're getting about 19 miles per gallon. So idle time is 25% compared to about 50. So that's just the difference of how the motor functions too.
You probably don't have any fuel estimate on the V8.
I do not on the Dodge. The stickers is going to be different than what we see. I would still estimate when we had the Crown Vics over 8 cylinders, we were getting about 11 miles a gallon if I remember right. So very similar, but it probably does make a little bit of a difference. Our fuel cost is low. In January we paid $1.81 per gallon for fuel. We don't pay any tax on that. That's why.
Yeah, right. Any other questions for Greg? If not, I need a motion to waive the City of Carroll purchasing policy number 501 and approval to purchase one 2020 Forest Police Interceptor utility 3.3-liter V6 vehicle specified for $34,848 from Champion Ford.
So moved.
Second. There's a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Now we'll go ahead and vote, please.
Dirks?
Yes.
Seaman?
Yes.
Haley?
Yes.
Fleischner?
Yes.
Hayes?
Yes.
Cots?
Yes.
Motion's approved.
Thank you. The last item on the reports is the Carroll Public Library, Carroll City Hall, change order number 9. And Mike, please.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Before you this evening is a request to approve a change order for the Carroll Public Library, Carroll City Hall project. And this change order is just for issues at the library project. There's a few items that were unexpected as construction moves forward. Some of the larger items is some changes and issues we found with the police department doors. We realized that those were really getting end of life, and with some additional electronics that we were looking to add to this project, we decided to take this opportunity to replace those so we don't incur reinstallation costs later on electronics. Some changes that staff wanted with locks added to some cabinets, some sink issues. We ended up deleting a card access, so there was a reduction there, and some lighting changes in the atrium that we felt that needed to be made. These, like I said, are only changes within the library scope of the project. I would note there are still a few items that are outstanding, so there will be a future change order from the library. The proposed change order number 9 adds no working days for the city hall, adds 5 working days for the library portion of the project. Completion date, kind of feels weird to say that we have one for the city hall, but this remains November 1st. The library is now, the completion date is January 31st. I can only tell you what's on the change order. The total change order amount is $30,010. The previous contract total with change order number 8 was $4,887,339. With this change order, the new change order contract amount would be $4,917,349. We did have a planned contingency in the budget of $362,088. After change order number 8, we only had $849 remaining. If this change order is approved, our planned contingency will have exceeded by $29,161. What I would note is there's a number of areas in the budget that were under budget, including the furnishings budget for the library portion and the city hall portion. And miscellaneous, we're well under budget in the miscellaneous area. So overall, the project budget will remain under $6.8 million. I'd also note that is everything kind of related to the project, including a recent land purchase of a commercial savings bank. That was included in the $6.8 million. So overall, we will remain within the $6.8 million budget. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions or concerns related to change order number 9.
Any questions for Mike?
It's not change order number 9, but with the elevator, we're gonna incur any extra costs than what we bid?
Moving past you, no. The elevator, the issue with the elevator was it was really a manufacturing delay with Schindler. I know Bating Construction had worked. They started including me on emails back in April and really just ran into a lot of issues with them and getting them out here timely. There's certain steps that Schindler had to come out to measure the shaft itself, make sure everything was set up, and they would take 3 months to show up. They were supposed to be here before Christmas with the elevator. It showed up last Tuesday. So this has really been a manufacturer issue. A U.S. company manufacturing.
Mike, I'm curious, just with the conversation that you and I had briefly on Friday, I'm just concerned about the police doors being on the change order, because that wasn't part of the original scope. I agree that they do need to be replaced. I don't have a problem with that. I just have a little bit of concern with it being on the change order for this.
Yeah. And certainly, it's council discretion of if you want to include it in a change order. Obviously, the changing out of the police department doors themselves wasn't part of the project. Nothing caused, as part of the library project, those doors to be changed out. Frankly, when we started to look at it, when we got some alerts from the general contractor saying, hey, there's some real functional issues here. And interesting enough, when Farner was built, there was actually solid doors. I don't know if they were wood or metal doors. And at some point, those were changed out. And the glass doors were attached to the old framing of those doors. And that's what's starting to fail. They're 40 years old, so why they did what they did. So what we did was we ended up taking out the entire frame structure and putting in a new frame structure. So these doors will last a long time, but certainly this was not a cause of the library project. So if the council decides to take this out of change order number 9, we would be able to move it into our regular budget and fund it that way. And I've kind of alerted to the contractor that may be something. So if that's a direction the council wants to take, we'll make that change.
If we did that, would that delay the installation or anything like that, or is that fairly seamless?
No, I mean, typically a lot of times with change orders, and this would be the case, mid-construction, if you delay, there's additional costs. We've already proceeded with that work, so the doors are actually in. So yeah, there would be no delay in the construction project.
I just, with the whole library project, it's, like I said, I'm a little bit hesitant to put it underneath that. I mean, I know we're gonna come in under budget, but I would like that gap to be as large as possible. And if there's another way to fund it, I'd feel more comfortable with that.
Yeah. If council decides to take it out, this will, it may cause a budget amendment later, but there'd be other funds that the city could use to fund that item.
Maybe it keeps the project the way it was intended.
Yep.
So what fund you gonna take that 15,000 out of?
I don't know if it'll be general fund or local option sales tax. I mean, one of the easiest ones would be when this project comes in under budget, there's going to be a surplus of local option sales tax. So if you take it back out of local option sales tax, it really it's a wash from that perspective.
I'm just kind of almost concerned. Does this have? You would say this relates to the library project?
No,
not at all.
I would absolutely
Okay.
say this doesn't relate to.
Okay.
I mean, the only tentacle that would touch it was we added door access control. Additionally, we're adding, part of this cost was, as we went through it, we added automatic door openers. If you'll recall, the farmer government only had 2 entries. The entry on the east side had handicap accessible entry buttons. The west side, where the PD is, did not. So this project will also now add those. Once you add kind of those door openers and the door access on an old set of doors, that's where we looked and said, hey, this just doesn't make sense to install this equipment when we're looking at in the next 3 to 5 years. We're likely going to have to replace these doors. That would be the only tentacle into the doors. And I know, Chief, you've been having problems actually just unlocking and locking the door. I mean, there was just a number of issues.
Kind of changed when they were vibrating, everything, the doors settled or something happened and they were not functioning. We had to keep our lights on because they weren't locked for 5 months.
Oh. I'm moderately sure no matter which way we fund this, we will be wrong.
Well, I just don't want it to look like we diverted it away from.
I agree.
That's what I'm seeing.
But I think the conversation tonight is going to be reflected in the minutes.
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, this was simply. I mean, these doors had ran their useful life, and so if the library project would never have happened, these doors likely would have been replaced regardless at some point in the near future. That's my take.
So with that, I'm agreeing with Mike. It should not be paid out of the library.
I guess that's where I'm asking too. So with that being said, I understand both sides. Where is the best place for it? I mean, I'm not sure.
I mean, probably accurately would be the general fund.
Coming out of local option sales tax anyway, isn't it?
Either way. I mean, it's a count. Yeah, I mean, I think either general fund dollars themselves or local option sales tax, either one is suitable.
From that standpoint, it doesn't matter to me one way or the other.
What I would say for
I think we could be seen as trying to hide something or push it aside, but it's coming out of the same pot.
Yeah, as long as we're transparent, I mean, you look at the doors, the tile for I mean, it's all part of the facade, and making it work. The money's there, we're over budget. If we go somewhere else, then we're taking up funds that maybe we would need for something else. As long as we're 100% transparent with this, I think we're okay since we're under budget.
Well, there was a discussion on last year. Shouldn't be anything else working on upright construction. Shouldn't be any surprises. This was a surprise.
Well, no, we said there'd be no more on the last change order for City Hall. We were pretty clear about that.
Okay.
And City Hall is done. I mean, we're obviously residing in space.
Some might argue about the heating system.
Hey, there's always tweaks.
Yeah.
that we have to make.
Cold earlier, now it's hot. Is that getting a motion from the other side?
So you could approve change order number 9 in the amount of $14,246. That would take care of all the items. And that would disinclude the police station front doors. And you can make a separate motion probably to pay for the police doors out of suitable fund or out of LSD or general fund.
What I would say for now is just authorize that purchase. We'll go back and figure out exactly where, and then through a budget amendment, we'll make that change at that point.
Just won't take back tile with you when you go.
The tile, I would argue, is very much project related. Yes, that one I would argue is.
Yeah, I went down a little bit. I agree with Mike.
Yeah.
Yeah, the doors are minor concern too. That's
Okay.
and Mike, correct me if I'm wrong, but you also said this will affect CAT grant.
It has that potential. We're still working through numbers. I mean, obviously, we want to maximize that, but obviously expenses are coming in below expectations. So yeah, we may end up getting a little bit less through the CAT grant. One of the conversations we'll have with them is they do allow some in-kind matches, staff time on the project. So if we can get some of that added back in, then we should be fine.
Yeah, that was my other concerns. I just on the project that we presented, and all of a sudden we're adding stuff in because we have extra money. I don't like the perception of that.
But do it the right way. That's do it correct and do it the right way. That's right.
So we would extract the doors, but the tile is all part of the floor.
That's what I would look.
How does it affect the cat? I didn't realize that.
Well, with the CAT grant itself, there's a certain project cost overall.
Okay.
We're coming in under what we originally
then
estimated. So there may be a prorated amount. They follow percentage formula, so it's not like if we come in $100, we lose $100. It would be like 10 cents.
But I can see where, the optics. I didn't know that about the CAT grant.
They're probably going to lose 150 on CAT grant on this.
Well, but
It'll go to somebody else. The project needs it done.
sure.
So the dollar amount without the police station front doors is $14,246.
So I would make a motion that we approve change order number 9 for the dollar amount of $14,246. Eliminate the police station front doors.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Go ahead and vote, please.
Seaman,
Yes.
Washner,
Yes.
Haley,
Yes.
Dirks,
Yes.
Cox,
Yes.
Reese.
Yes.
Motion is approved.
And then I would make a motion to fund the balance, the $15,764 to be identified by funding source. It
Needs
should
to be determined.
Yep.
I'll second.
There's a motion and a second. If there's no other discussion, we'll go ahead and vote, please.
Cox,
Yes.
Dirks,
Yes.
Haley,
Yes.
Reese.
Yes.
Washner,
Yes.
Seaman.
Yes.
Motion is approved.
Thank you. We didn't have any committee reports this month. I have no comments this evening. Are there any comments from the council? Any comments from the city manager?
Just to get on your schedule, and I got to look at my calendar now. Northwest League of Cities is actually going to be here in Carroll. We'll be hosting that event on the 26th of March. We'll be at Moose Lodge for dinner, and then we'll definitely tour the library project with the group. We may also tour biochemistry and Carroll Brewing if I can pull off those two tours. But it's a good group of elected field officials, and I think some good projects to showcase in Carroll.
So rather than the presentations that we do, the presentations will basically be the tours.
Yeah. And it will be the speaker event essentially because we usually have a speaker come in and detail those projects.
Anything else? No, I'll need a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second. There's a motion and a second. We'll go vote, please.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Fleischner?
Yes.
Leeds?
Yes.
Reed?
Yes.
Very good.
Thank you.